Is Adobe Photoshop Elements for you? This is MacVoices. This edition of MacVoices is supported by the MacVoices Dispatch, our weekly newsletter to keep you up on all the latest from MacVoices. Watch or listen to MacVoices straight from your email client. Sign up at macvoices.com/newsletter and stay up to date. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, usually when the word Photoshop comes up on MacVoices, we kind of put it off to the side because Photoshop has become now the purview of the professionals. And we forget about Photoshop Elements as something that is a lot more accessible to us mere mortals. And I can't think of anybody that is better suited to explain some of that and why it's suited to us mere mortals than Jeff Carlson. He's the author of the new Adobe Photoshop Elements Visual Quickstart Guide covering Photoshop Elements 2022. Jeff, welcome. It's great to have you back.
Hi, it's wonderful to be back, as always.
So how did I do on the introduction? Is Photoshop... Because I absolutely don't want to disparage Photoshop from the standpoint of its capabilities, because it's a professional level tool. And again, we do forget about Photoshop Elements, that it has a lot of the capabilities of the full-powered Photoshop. Photoshop. I said that right.
Yeah.
But that is accessible to the rest of us. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, it is. I mean, Photoshop Elements it's always been this sort of weird odd duck to the side, which is it's very much designed for people who think they need Photoshop, who want to edit images and do creative things, but they don't really want Photoshop, because the full-blown Photoshop can do all sorts of things that a typical Photoshop Elements user probably would never even touch. It's like you need to go camping and you think that you need to buy, a Hummer or some sort of, all-wheel drive massive vehicle, when really what you need is just maybe a van that will take you to the campsite that has all the little spots available, right? It's not a great analogy, but Photoshop is just big and huge and expensive, and then Photoshop Elements has it's much less expensive, running approximately like $100, $150 if you get it in a bundle with Premiere Elements, which is their video editor. And it has a lot of features that are really geared toward people who don't want to be a Photoshop master. They don't really want to know how to manipulate layers, and they want results. They don't really want to have to, sit down and watch 4 hours of YouTube videos to figure out how to do something. Now, the little secret trick in there is that the engine behind Photoshop Elements is the engine behind the full-blown Photoshop. And so you do actually have a lot of that capability, a lot of that raw processing power available if you know how to use it. And so it's this mix of professional level tool that can do a lot of professional things, and these features that will walk you through how to do things that you want to get done, even if you don't know how to manipulate layers and things like that. So it just has this really special place, and it's something that, when I have people ask me what they should use, because there are so many things right now, Lightroom, Affinity, Luminar, all sorts of different options now, much more than there were in the past. A lot of it comes down to what people want to do. Do they want to just crop and make some basic adjustments? Maybe, Photos, the built-in Photos app is the thing for them. But do they want to do something more complicated? They want to take a few family photos, and in all of them, someone is blinking or looking the wrong direction. and they know that there's the capability to merge those together so that the one person who's looking away, well, in photo number 2, they're looking ahead. And can we merge those together? Well, even in regular Photoshop, that's quite a bit of work. And in Photoshop Elements, there's a tool, this guided edit, that will let you. Sorry, it's not a guided edit. It's a photo merge. That's not important, but it's a tool that makes it super, super easy to make something like that happen. And so, being able to have that sort of ease of use wrapped in a professional container is appealing for a lot of people.
Well, I'm trying to be careful here because my intent is absolutely not to disparage Photoshop Elements for being less capable than Photoshop. But you said it
Right.
yourself. There's so much more competition now from some really terrific apps. And so for Elements to find its place amongst that, I love what you just said because you're right. I'm always intrigued by the Photoshop experts who show you an image and say, okay, here's these 75 steps that it took to get this image. And boy, if you do these 75 steps, you too can create this image. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, that's great. But, I like the effect or I like the image, but I'm not about to do 75 steps. So now
Right.
if Elements has packaged some of those things into almost a pre-made cake mix where I just add water and get the result, that's exactly what I'm looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, some of the things that they've done, like just as one example, in the new version, they have this perfect pet guided edit. And if you break it down, let's say you have a picture of your pet. And what I also love about Elements is it is very intentionally fun. Like, they realize that people take pictures of their pets and they're going to want to share pictures of their pets. And just like people share pictures of children and all sorts of things. And when you break it down to how do I edit a picture of my dog, there are a lot of very basic things. You're talking about exposure. You're talking about maybe making the background slightly blurry. Adding detail to the fur. Like there are all sorts of things you can do. But like you said, you have to kind of know which direction to go. Which recipe of things do you need to apply in order to make this photo of your pet better? Well, they said, how about if we just make a tool and you open your image, you go to the guided edit mode and you click the perfect pet guided edit, and it just walks you through, like, I think 4 steps in order to improve this image. It'll change the exposure. It'll let you select the pet, and it has like a really good way of doing that. You can blur the background, and you don't have to know the recipe for doing all of that. You just follow what it tells you, and then you end up with a better image. And so
So,
it's go ahead.
well, I want to be clear on this. So you're saying that when I use these guided edits, I still have some input into the process. It's not like the I forget what they call it in photos, but it's just not like that one button improve the photo, and it does
Right.
even no matter how good that is through machine learning, it still is basically the same thing. It does one thing. Here, it sounds
Mhm.
like I still have control that maybe I'm going to make this up as I go, but maybe I
Sure.
have a dark cat, so that means I need more exposure to see the cat better. Or if
Yes.
I have a white cat, maybe I don't need as much exposure. That's a terrible analogy, but I hope you get what I'm
No, no,
saying.
no, no. That's actually spot on because, like one of the things that it will do is it will select the pet, because usually, we're not taking pictures of pets on really nice backgrounds. It's usually a snapshot or something. If you have a cat, you take a picture of the cat wherever the cat wants you to take a picture of it, right? So, you can then select that, and there's this feature in Photoshop and Photoshop Elements that's just called subject selection, and you do click one button and it figures out where the subject is. and just selects it. So you don't even have to, drag around and do all sorts of things if you don't want to make that selection. And then once the cat is selected, then you can change the exposure. If it's a white cat, you can bring the exposure down. You'll see a little bit more detail. If it's a black dog, one of the examples that I have is, my sister's dog. It's mostly all black, and you can just add like a little bit more exposure to bring that up, so you see more detail in the dog's face and its haunches and such. And then with the selection made, then you can choose, like, I think there are maybe 9 or 10 different treatments that you can make. You can add a vignette, you can blur the background, you can I can't recall what the other ones are, but you do have options to do all these. And then here's the sort of secret sauce to it. It's all those things that you would do if you were just doing this manually. Those are all being done behind the scenes. And so once you're done with this edit, you can then switch back to the expert mode. And then you have all the layers and you have everything that Photoshop has done to make that. And so then you can go back and maybe tweak something if you know how to use those elements. So it's helping both people who really don't know what they're doing and really don't want to know. Like, I just know that I want this picture to look better. I know that it can look better, but I'm not exactly sure how. Well, I'm going to open Photoshop Elements and I'm going to click this guided edit, and it's going to walk me through how to make this look better. And honestly, that's not something that really, I don't think any other program is doing right now, because they're all focused on, here are the tools for you to do X, Y, and Z, and you'll have to learn how to do X, Y, and Z. And Photoshop Elements has sort of stuck into this niche that says, we recognize that not everybody wants to become a photo editor. They don't want to become a Photoshop expert. They want to take a picture. As another example, there's a new guided edit called Extend Background. Sometimes you'll take a picture of someone, and they're too close to the edge. And so if you were to print and frame that, the tops of their head gets cut off, or they're the shot where they're in focus, they're like way off to the side. And depending on the background, let's just say that there's like a nice blue sky behind them, you can then extend that, and it uses a lot of the Photoshop technology, this content aware technology, to fill that in and do that really easily. It's stuff that you can do manually that takes several steps and some a little bit of know-how. But here, the guided edit, it just says, oh yeah, we'll just make this bigger and we'll fill it in for you, and there you go.
I'm intrigued by this because it sounds like you've described it very well. It sounds like something that I've got my hand held through the process. But then if I want to take a look at those previously mentioned 75 steps to get this perfect image, I can actually do it. So maybe I can take that and publish it a web post and say, hey, I figured out these 75 steps. No, let's not do that. But again, just the idea is that, there's that, I don't know what the right analogy would be, but there's that recipe for how did I get this, and the ability to tweak the ingredients along the way to suit that particular image or your particular taste.
Yeah. It's going to sound strange, but it's one of the most consumer conscious apps that I can think of, because they're really focused on, what are people using the app for? What do people want to do that's otherwise complicated that we can make easier? And so there are all sorts of guided edits and photo merge tools that do this. And these aren't new. I mean, this has been a hallmark of Photoshop Elements for quite a long time. It's just they keep adding new clever things that it can do. And there are some things that, like I said, like it's purely fun. Adobe recognizes that people want to make, you know, social media post things, right? You need to be able to share something quickly that's sized appropriately or that catches attention. Well, um, like another example of a new thing, it's called animated overlays. And you take a photo and you can add these animated, you know, you make snow or blow in front of or behind a person, and you can, you know, or maybe have, you know, sparkles, things like they don't look realistic. They're not supposed to look realistic. They're supposed to, you know, catch your eye. And so it's the type of picture where it acknowledges that someone's looking at their phone and they're scrolling through, and when something moves, they're probably going to stop and take a look. So that can either be, you know, you can have, let's say, a picture of a family member, and you know maybe they've just graduated from school, and you can take this still picture of them just, you know, standing there, and add a depth effect to it. So you know the background kind of shifts slightly and gives it that 3D look, and then maybe, you know, you have, you know, stars or sparkles or fireworks or something that are going off, and it sounds sort of basic, but there's also some smarts involved. So for example, um, using its like there's some AI technology built in. The Adobe Sensei is this sort of umbrella of AI technologies that Adobe puts into all its products. And so one of the things is it can recognize if there's a face there. So if there's a person there, you can click a checkbox so that they don't have fireworks bursting in front of their face. You can just have it look like it's behind them, and it'll just automatically do that mask. And then you export that as a GIF, and you know upload it to Facebook or whatever, and then here you have this like animated thing that catches people's attention. Or you know you could maybe put that into a, you know, professional context, and you know make a poster or a card or something like that. So you know it's not, I'm going to sound really snobby, it's not something that like a professional designer would do, but a professional designer would be using Photoshop and doing other things. This is something that's fun and grabs attention, and you know, all your family members who are spread out across the country and around the world will look at that and like it and maybe save it, and like that sort of stuff.
I no, I think it makes perfect sense, and there's just there's a space for that. I mean, there are a lot of fun photo apps out there that do things that, and they're mostly one trick ponies. So that
Yeah.
if I if I want to appear I like an alien, maybe I have alien photo that will give me
Right.
pointed ears and antenna or something. But this sounds, first of all, this sounds a lot more tasteful than what I
Yeah.
just described. But at the same time, and I want to make sure we touch on this too, because I think we've alluded to it, that we're talking about all the cool stuff here, that the guided edits and all to get you that better picture. But you still have you still have the manual controls completely available to you if you want to learn Photoshop, or if you already know Photoshop or some Photoshop, that you can go in and utilize those capabilities.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, you have layers and all the things that layers can bring. You have like adjustment layers, for example. When you're editing a photo, you don't necessarily want to change the pixels of the original. So let's say you have a dark photo, you want to make it brighter. You can use an adjustment layer, which is basically a layer that has this adjustment. You say, I'm going to increase the exposure on this, and it makes everything bright, but doesn't actually mess with the pixels on the original image. So then if you're doing some more editing and you realize that your screen was turned up too bright, and so you need to adjust your exposure, you can just do that really quickly, non-destructively. And there are lots and lots of tools, even outside of the guided edits, that are also geared for someone who, again, maybe doesn't know how to use curves, or they don't know how levels really work. And so it'll pop up a grid of 9 different options of exposure or color saturation, and you can drag a slider if you want and make that adjustment, or you could just take a look and say, no, the one in the upper left corner, that's what needs to happen. That needs to make this too bright picture look better, and you click that, and then it goes from there. So it's super accommodating to all sorts of skill levels, which is really appealing, again, to people who don't want to become experts. They know they need to work on their photos. They want to edit their photos, but as we both know, being a photo editor, doing edits on your photos, that can be a really daunting task. And I think Photoshop Elements slots really nicely in the capabilities that it can do, but it's also approachable and it's friendly.
Oh, and again, it's educational too, because if I can go in then and look at those steps that the program has assisted me in taking, I can learn maybe a bit about why the end result was something that appealed to me. Because otherwise, I mean, you're right. You're slapping down an incredibly powerful toolbox and say, here, do this and apply this tool and see what happens, and run it up the scale from 0 to 100 and see what it does. Okay, now take the next tool and the next tool and the next tool, and pretty soon, you just say, the heck with it. I'm going to print the photo and walk away. And so I like the educational aspect of this as well. Jeff Carlson is back in the next edition of MacVoices to talk more about the capabilities of Adobe Photoshop Elements and his new book, Adobe Photoshop Elements Visual Quickstart Guide. Jeff also asked me to remind you that you can save 35% on the Visual Quickstart Guide by visiting peachpit.com/VQS and using the code VQS at checkout. I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices. We'll be back next time with Jeff. Until then, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you MacVoices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.